announced yesterday. 44 we've closed so far this year. We're now down from a peak of 400 to less than 160 hotels, and we're determined to make sure we close every single one by the end of the next Parliament.
And the closures will hopefully save us around £50 million. What is the difference in cost then? If I arrive in this country and I'm not in the metropole and instead I go to a former military site, what's the difference in cost, Minister?
So we believe it was costing about £53,000 per person to be in a hotel. Now, the cost of the military base at the moment is probably not too dissimilar, but that's because we're at the set-up costs. So obviously, as you can imagine, we've had to adapt these military bases. We've had to buy them. We've had to make them secure. We've had to make sure they've got all the infrastructure and the resources. So that cost will come down over time. And as I said, so far, because of not just the reduction in use of hotels, but also because of our reduction in the numbers of people claiming asylum, we have saved £1 billion so far since the election on expenditure in asylum accommodation, and we're determined to keep driving that down so we can use that money for things that British people really want to see it spent on.
Minister, let's talk about the source of part of the problem, which is people arriving here illegally on, well, they're not all small boats, are they? Looking at the photographs yesterday. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister insisted, and I quote, "The plan is working." Yesterday, Mr Burnham said, "We will now change our tactics." Does he not know what's going on?
Well, it's both. It's both in this situation.
How can it be working and change your tactics, Anatoly?
Well, because that's why we're seeing those bigger boats. So we've decreased the numbers coming through on the small boats. We've disrupted 47,000 people from crossing this year. We've made over 1,000 arrests. We've destroyed over 1,000 boats and engines. We have made a huge impact so far. I say the asylum numbers in July were the lowest for several years. We are down over 40%. So we are making progress on the numbers of people coming over via small boats. But the challenge is, exactly as you rightly pointed out, they are dispersing now. They're getting increasingly desperate. They are pushing more and more people onto horrendously flimsy, terrible boats that we've seen this week that are not seaworthy, that are seriously endangering lives. And that is a sign to say that we've still got so much more to do, and we're conscious of that. So we will adapt as the gangs adapt. We will adapt to make sure they cannot get the supply parts for these, that we break up and disrupt the supply chains, and that we prevent people getting to the beaches on the first place.
Minister,
to try
I have to respectfully push back a little bit. In the first 22 days of Andy Burnham in Number 10, 3,000 migrants have arrived. In the first 22 days of Sir Keir Starmer, it was 2,228. More have arrived under this Prime Minister. That is the reality.
Well, this has been a difficult month, August, as always, but I'm looking across the year. The progress is there.
But I don't want to give... Prime Ministerial period and more have arrived. What message is that sending? Well, he's a soft touch. He's a soft touch.
I don't think that's been the motivation.
2 weeks ago, the plan is working. Yesterday, we need to change our tactics. He's a soft touch. He doesn't have a clue. He's Inspector Clouseau. He is Inspector Clouseau here, isn't he?
I don't think that's the case at all. He said he's going to be absolutely relentless. I know he's determined on that. I mean, he's just, he said exactly as my experience knocking on doors in Makefield as I knock on doors in Redcar. This is a massive issue for people. People are horrified, not just to see, as I said, the humanitarian risk, but we do not want people coming here who have not undertaken safe and legal routes, who are circumventing our immigration system. We do not want our borders to be insecure in this way. And that is why we're continuing to crack down, as I said, both on disrupting the gangs and the supply chains. We're also dealing with the pull factors. The Home Secretary is bringing forward another immigration and asylum bill, which will make things less attractive for people to come here, will make it harder for them to keep lodging appeal after appeal, will support us in removing people who have no right to be here. So all of this working together is one of the reasons why the numbers are down, and will continue to bear down on that.
Minister, in a deal initially started under the Conservatives but continued by your government, we have sent over a period of years more than £1 billion to Paris for supposedly enhanced border security. What have we got value for money there?
Well, as I said, it is having an effect, and often we don't see the boats that don't get over. We only see the awful pictures of the ones that do. 47,000 crossings have been stopped.
Yeah, but they'll try again, won't they? If I've got to Calais from Kabul, I'm going to, even if you turn me around, I'm not going to go home to Kabul. It's a long way to Kabul. I'm going to have another go.
Exactly. And this is why, Nick, you're absolutely right. And this is why we have to this is working across countries, working at source. We're trying to make sure that we look at safe and legal routes. But we have to disrupt these horrendous gangs that, as we've seen from those images, do not give a monkey's about people's lives or human safety, who are exploiting them for money. These are the gangs, and we've doubled the investment of the NCA, the National Crime Agency, to tackle these gangs, to root them out across the world, to disrupt the supply chains of the dinghies, of the parts that come together. This is how we will get to the root source of the problem, whilst, as I said, trying to create safe and legal routes, so people who are generally fleeing war and persecution, who, as I think all British people would say, look, we do have a history of supporting and protecting people who are fleeing war, but we cannot have a system where that safe and legal routes are circumvented by criminal gangs exploiting desperate people, and that's our job to keep bearing down on that.
Last minute or so together, many of my listeners say, why can't we deploy the Royal Navy or the Border Force in more robust fashion? Your response to that, Minister?
Well, the Royal Navy were deployed in 2022, and I'm afraid it didn't have any impact at all on border crossings. I mean, British Navy are fantastic, but they don't have anything else that our Border Security Command do not have. We have the drones, we have the surveillance, we have the technology on this side, everything we are doing to make that happen. So the Royal Navy, I'm afraid, is not, it sounds good in principle, but it's not a practical solution. We have all the tools that we need to enable to enforce that. The reality is, as I said, we have to work with the French, we have to work cross boundaries, and we have to deal with the root causes of why people are trying to come to this country and who's exploiting them to get here.
Well, isn't that the pull factor, don't you think? £49.18 per week for free NHS? That's surely part of the pull factor, isn't it, Minister?
Well, we have to look at all of our pull factors, and as I said, we are looking at both.
£49.18 every week. What do you think?
Well, I think people have to be able to survive. We have an obligation to support people who are
free eyesight tests, extra money if you're pregnant. Is that right? Should we be offering all this?
These are, if people are genuinely fleeing war and persecution, we have a right to support genuine refugees who come to this country. What we've seen too much of, and I know that British people feel this very strongly, is too many people here are coming to exploit that situation. That is why, as I said, the Home Secretary, with her Asylum and Immigration Bill, is bearing down on these pull factors. We've doubled the amount of illegal arrests for people who are working here in the black market. We've got to make sure that we are deporting people too. 70,000 gone in the last 2 years.
Lastly, the Prime Minister said yesterday, all parts of the country need to play their part as regards the settling of migrants, and when pressed, he said that even wealthier parts must play their part. It can't be right that the 400 people of an Oxfordshire village of Pittington are going to have 1,200 people move next door in a migrant camp. That can't be correct. That's 3 times the number in the village.
Well, the point is that they're not going to be in the village. They're going to be contained in a former military base, which has
they're not allowed out.
Contained facilities. No, they will be allowed out, but everything they need will be on that site. So they will be managed. They will be contained.
So they'll go to Pittington, won't they? How can you impose 1,200 people on a village where the population is 400, Minister?
Look, this is so they're on a self-contained site. We are looking at former military bases around the country. We're also looking at former industrial sites, student accommodation, other means by which we can put people in secure places that is contained, that is manageable, and going back to the beginning of our conversation, is more affordable than putting people in hotels. We know where people are, we can manage the system.
You'd be happy for that number of people last year to arrive at Redcar, would you, Minister?
Well, look, we don't have a former military base in my site, but the reality is it's about fairness.
Or you might have an industrial estate in Redcar. You'd be happy for people to move there.
The point the Prime Minister was making was this is about fairness. We take our fair share of asylum seekers and in Redcar, and the point is lots of working class places around the country. I talked about Blackpool. Places with hotels have had to bear more than their fair share, and this is about fairness. This is making sure that there is distribution around the country, and that this is about a more fair and equitable system that limits the impact on local communities. And by having secure and maintained and managed facilities like former military bases, it's a much better way to keep people in one place and reduce the impact on local communities.
The number of hotels has been closed, more 13 closures. It was at 400 under Conservatives. It's now below 160, saving more than £50 million in the process. I'm grateful. Border Security and Asylum Minister for your time. Anna Turley, thank you. Let's get the LBC headlines. 3 minutes after 8.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Andy Burnham has issued a direct response to PC Andrew Harper's sister after she spoke to LBC about the prospect of her brother's killers walking free. Amy Harper told us that Albert Bowers and Jessie Cole showed no remorse during the trial, and she truly doubts that's changed. As it stands, the pair will be freed next year as part of the early prison release scheme. LBC put Amy's concerns to the Prime Minister, who says he's increasingly confident their release can be blocked.
I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't do everything I possibly could to try and lessen your anguish. I am turning over every stone. I am looking at everything. I am pushing the system to go further. That's the way I go about my job. I listen to people.
Separately, 50 police leaders have signed a letter urging Andy Burnham to use every lawful option to prevent PC Harper's killers from early release. They've called for greater consideration of victims when prisoners have their sentences altered. The Prime Minister will chair a meeting of the government's Emergency Cobra Committee later in response to extreme heat. Downing Street says it understands that the repeated heat waves have been difficult for firefighters, NHS staff and farmers. Family, friends and political colleagues will gather in Devon today for the funeral of Anne Widdecombe. A special mass is being held at Buckfast Abbey. The former Conservative MP was found dead in her home in Dartmoor last month. A man has been charged with her murder. Andy Burnham has suggested that wealthier areas of the UK should play their part and house more asylum seekers. The Prime Minister says the country can't have a situation where it's only the poorest communities in the country. The remarks follow protests in Oxfordshire against plans to house asylum seekers at a former military site in Bicester. The Border Security Minister Anna Turley has told Nick Ferrari at breakfast that Labour is determined to close all remaining hotels by the next election.
44 we've closed so far this year. We're now down from a peak of 400 to less than 160 hotels. And as I said, so far, because of not just the reduction in use of hotels, but also because of our reduction in the numbers of people claiming asylum, we have saved £1 billion so far since the election on expenditure in asylum accommodation. And we're determined to keep driving that down so we can use that money for things that British people really want to see it spent on.
And the UK will be treated to its best solar eclipse since 1999 tonight. Up to 96% of the sun's disk will be covered by the moon in some areas. Officials are reminding people not to look directly at the eclipse, though, including through sunglasses. In the city, the FTSE 100 just reopened at 10,844. It closed down 18 yesterday. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.17. LBC weather, dry and sunny for most of England and Wales through today. Some cloud around for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Hot in the south, a high of 33 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dominic Ellis.
From the first time they lose a
baby tooth. Look, Mum.
To the countless times they forget to mention their
ingredients for food tech tomorrow.
To the last time you hear that school was...
Yeah, all right.
Kids grow up fast. Luckily at Tesco, we have back-to-school uniform that grows with them, including everything they need, like trousers and skirts with adjustable hems and waists. So you can focus less on the cost and more on all this. Tesco, every little helps. Available in the majority of larger stores and online.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning, 7 minutes after 8 on Wednesday, August the 12th. A little bit behind the clock there after that extended interview with the Immigration Minister. And we will continue with what she was telling us, because coming to a disused military camp or industrial estate or student accommodation near you, some of those asylum seekers and the plight of Pittington. How can it be right a village of 400 population will have 1,200 mostly young males camped effectively just around the corner? How is that right? Meanwhile, Andy Burnham telling LBC that we need to use pubs, we need to give them possibly longer opening hours because they bring people together and they increase safety.
They bring people onto the high street later into the evening, and that increases the feeling of safety in those places.
We'll analyse those words from Mr. Burnham and see if they actually seem to hold water. In other news, those of you who remember the UK office will remember Lucy Davis appearing as Dawn Tinsley.
I've never stolen as much as a paperclip and you're firing me.
And the good news is, I don't need to give you any severance pay because it's gross misconduct. So you can go straight away.
Appearing there with co-star Ricky Gervais, it was all, of course, a joke in the show if you watched it. Now, sadly, Lucy Davis reveals I have incurable cancer, but I'm at peace. We'll give you more details on that story. Plus, trouble down on the farm. That's the music from Clarkson's song. Get ready for meat, fruit and vegetable prices to soar from extreme summer and poor harvests. More on that in this hour.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 60 60 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
3 miles. I don't know where you're sitting or driving, standing right now. Think 3 miles away. Think you're in a village of 400. I would imagine a lovely, bucolic, I love that word, Oxfordshire village of Pittington. And you may recall we filed reports from there a couple of weeks ago, or last month certainly. And suddenly the 400 of you are going to be dwarfed in size by 1,200, mostly young males, coming from a variety of countries, being settled in a military site, 3 miles away. Now, this is all part of a drive, it would appear, by the Prime Minister to ensure that asylum seekers could be coming to, as I said earlier, student accommodation at Issues Military Camp very near to you. It's important, he says, that it's shared out among the country.
It's obviously going to be challenging, but I am prepared always to listen to people, to work with people, and to pick up legitimate concerns, and I will address those concerns. I do have to say, we cannot have a situation where it's only the poorest communities in the country that receive, all of the dispersal of refugees and asylum seekers. I do believe all parts of the country need to work to play their part. It's a challenging issue. We're working at it. We understand people's concerns, and I will look into the issues raised by the good people of Pittington.
Well, I'm sure you're delighted to hear that if you're listening in the Cheshire or the Garden of England in Kent or out in the Cotswolds. That's just what you want to hear, isn't it? But what of Pittington? Reference there towards the end by the Prime Minister. I remind you, 400 individuals living there, 1,200 on the way. Question I put to the Asylum Minister, Anna Turley, just before the last news bulletin.
They're not going to be in the village. They're going to be contained in a, former military base, which, has
they're not allowed out.
Contained facilities. No, they will be allowed out, but everything they need will be on that site. So they will be managed. They will be contained.
So they'll go to Pittington, won't they? How can you impose 1,200 people on a village where the population is 400, Minister?
Look, this is, so they're on a self-contained site. We are looking at former military bases around the country. We're also looking at former industrial sites, student accommodation, other means by which we can put people in secure places that is contained, that is manageable. And going back to the beginning of our conversation, is more affordable than putting people in hotels. We know where people are.
It's just words, isn't it? Let's put some of this to Senior Conservative MP, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp. Many elements to discuss, whether it is the village of Pittington, whether it is that mega dinghy we saw yesterday, or whether it is the first 22 days as Prime Minister. More people have arrived under Andy Burnham than did under Sir Keir Starmer. About 800 more. Start where you choose. Mr. Philp, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, well, just when we thought we couldn't get anything worse than Keir Starmer, it appears we just have. Andy Burnham is worse than Keir Starmer. More illegal immigrants entering the country, mostly, of course, young men, contrary to what Angela Rayner absurdly claimed yesterday. And it's quite clear Andy Burnham is out of his depth. He's got no idea how to fix this problem at all. And what he seemed to be saying yesterday is that his solution was to basically, send these illegal immigrants to little villages and little towns all around the country, places like Pittington, which is totally unacceptable. What should be happening, it's very simple, what should be happening is when these illegal immigrants arrive in our country, they should be immediately deported with no asylum claim, no human rights claim, no modern slavery claim, no legal aid, no court process, no messing around, no hotel, nothing. Just deported straight away, back to their country of origin if that's possible, or a safe third country like Rwanda. Otherwise, they shouldn't be put up anywhere, not in a hotel, not in Pittington, not anywhere. They should be deported. They've entered our country illegally. They've broken into our country, and they should be kicked out straight away.
So you say no accommodation, no hotels, no allowances or whatever. For that to work, surely, Mr. Philp, we'll have no lawyers, because there will be an army of lawyers ready to fight you on that, wouldn't there?
Quite right. I gave a whole speech about this a few weeks ago to Policy Exchange. Yes, no lawyers, which means leaving the ECHR, and it means completely excluding the court system and the legal system from this entire process. If somebody comes into this country illegally, we should kick them out without a legal process, because as soon as you start having some legal process, you get people making up all kinds of different ridiculous claims, and that's how we've ended up in this mess in the first place. The government can't move for lawyers and ECHR claims, and that's one of the reasons we've got to leave the ECHR so we can deport these illegal immigrants.
But it was, many of my listeners would be thinking, it was only just over 2 years ago that it was your party, and indeed you were a senior member of that party, that was in power. Why weren't you looking at some of that then, Mr. Phil?
Well, of course, there was the Rwanda plan that was ready to go at the time of the last election.
That's not as robust as what you've just outlined there, Mr. Phil.
It's not you're right, it's not as robust, because we've now got new leadership. I'm a new Shadow Home Secretary, Kemi's the new leader, and we've got a different and much tougher approach, because we saw the last government trying to fix this. We saw the Starmer government trying to fix it and completely failing. We're now seeing Andy Burnham miserably failing as well. So that is why we do need a very radically different and much tougher approach, which does mean no lawyers, no courts, no legal aid, no messing around, just immediate deportation. And if we do that, pretty quickly the migrants will stop coming, because why would a migrant in France come to the UK if they know they're going to get kicked out essentially immediately?
Lastly, when I saw the photograph of more than 200 people on that mega dinghy, you can hardly call it a dinghy really, that was published yesterday, I recall that one of the last conversations you very kindly effectively reported from the beaches in France as you were following a group of, I imagine, asylum seekers. How did you react when you either saw that photograph or heard the story and the number of people that were on that vessel?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was shocked and appalled and disgusted, actually, that 230 illegal immigrants, mostly young men, were led into our country where they're going to cost taxpayers millions. They're going to get inflicted on some village like Pittington. And the French could have stopped that boat if they wanted to. And, you can't miss a boat with 230 people on it. And as you say, Nick, I was on the beach speaking to you. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago today.
Right.
And I saw a boat. It was a bit smaller than that. It had about 100 people. And the French gendarmes just stood there and did literally nothing, even though Shabana Mahmoud is paying them £660 million of our money. I was frankly
Well, the
disgusted.
Conservatives paid them £400 million of our money, Mr. Phil.
Yeah, and they stopped a few more people than they do now. But we shouldn't be paying them now, I think, anything if the French are not going to actually stop these boats. I saw 10 armed gendarmes, elite French officers, literally stand by the water's edge. I was next to the migrant dinghy myself. I was only knee-deep in water. It would have been easy to stop that dinghy, but the French didn't. I was frankly disgusted. And I spoke to quite a few of these illegal immigrants. Let's call them what they are. They're illegal immigrants. They were almost entirely young men. Some of them were quite aggressive, very aggressive. Lots of them didn't speak English, and I'm afraid to say, Nick, they were not doctors and engineers, if I can put it politely. So if they do end up making it to the UK, we've got to deport them straight away. Okay. Otherwise, they're going to keep on coming.
Grateful for your time. Thank you. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, Conservative politician, appearing here on LBC. Well, with that worries and also the possibility that we're going to release prisoners early, it's enough to make you want to go down the pub. Because it'll be safer, particularly safer for women. We'll look more into that claim after this. It's 8:17, LBC Headlines. Dominic Ellis.
As pressure builds on Andy Burnham, he's told LBC that he wouldn't forgive himself if he didn't do everything in his power to try and block the early release of PC Andrew Harper's killers. The Prime Minister is to chair a meeting of the government's Cobra Emergency Committee later in response to ongoing extreme temperatures and droughts. And speaking to Nick, the Border Security